So, Mirthwood, a quirky little sandbox farming sim with a dash of a dark side. I have 100 days to see if I can explore, farm and fight my way through. I also have a cheeky second objective, to buy the most expensive item in the game, the fabled unicorn mount, just for the simple fact that I want it. Well, anyway, without further ado, welcome to Mirthwood. And, well, it began, and I put together this rather handsome chap with a mustache, and then chose my origin. I went with the assertive one. Next up was the class, and I resonated most with the peasant. I will use less energy, but I will also be a little bit socially awkward. Finally, my profession. Criminal. This would give me more coins while selling things, but no one will like me. Why not lean into becoming a social outcast? I was on the hunt for my brother, Asher. But not before nabbing me a brown coat. A little odd, as far as I understand, a coat is a small shed for pigeons. Well, anyway, I also got a saggy croissant to place on top of my brain box. Lovely. It wasn't too long before me and my bare little toes were conversing with Asher. We were apparently out gathering ingredients for supper, so I pitter-pattered off in search of some ginseng and mushrooms. The mushrooms were found easily enough, and I even got something to cover my exposed feet, completing my peasant look. The last ginseng was located, where Mr. Know-It-All thought I was going to ask him about where my brother was. Little did he know, I had already talked to him. Joke's on you. I then scampered home to cook my mother's favourite dish. After getting my fill, I headed downstairs and read about Bramble Quillworthy, who was an explorer. He had written a little journal about an interesting newly discovered place called the Freelands. He started with a warning. It was supposedly filled with much peril and danger, having no laws there. But who would want to go to such a savage spot? Spoiler alert, me. I bunkered down for the night and awoke to war at my very doorstep, and I needed to reach the docks in order to escape. I quickly ran into my house to grab a family portrait and another darker pigeon hutch, which I popped on. Advancing west, I discovered my family, who was tending to my mother's leg. I was encouraged to head to the docks by myself, while they dealt with my mother. Not entirely sure why we couldn't just pick her up and travel along together, but there we are. I carried on solo style, and found a health elixir, and an upgrade. A bucket hat. I got my first taste of combat, which I quickly discovered drained stamina at an extortionate rate, as well as some painful lessons of not being able to block heavy attacks. This certainly wasn't my best performance, but I blame the lack of vision from my bucket hat. I topped up with an elixir and wandered into a bit of a moral dilemma. Thorn here was meant to guard the bridge, but left his post during the raid in order to stop some intruders from poisoning the village's water supply. Because this vital area was left undefended, it was easy pickings for the raiders, and resulted in significant loss of life. On the one side, you could say he was trying to do his best, and thought it would save potentially more lives. On the other hand, he could just be lying. So, who knows? I decided to stay out of it, not really knowing the full breadth of the story. A little fence sitter. I got a little update for my head fashion in the form of a rusty helm, given a smidge more defense. I got to the docks and settled in for a long boat ride to, well, you'll never guess, the Freelands. I made it onto land and spoke to a man who said I needed to bring a horse to a stranger. Well, that was enough to convince me, so I was off. After a rather long cinematic ride, I met the stranger. A bit of an enigmatic character who gave me this land to live off, at least for the time being. And then, just like that, he trotted off. I got onto my new land and had a little peek at the map. Fairly expansive. I made it to the main building, which certainly was looking a little bit worse for wear, but I did get the deed to the place. So this quaint little home was officially mine. There definitely was some work to do. Against my better judgment, I did what I was told and slept here for the night. The next morning, I was to meet the stranger at the nearby town of Bright Oak. Here I learnt about relationships and that NPCs had unique personalities and traits. So I continued on while being that annoyingly overly cheerful chap who greets everybody, until I took a quest from the notice board here. It said that the owner of the local meadery had gone missing, and we needed someone brave to go and check it out. Rolling into the tavern, I got talking to the innkeeper, who pointed me in the direction of the farm shop, where I could get some supplies. I ripped off a contract to deal with a particularly nasty bandit, who had been terrorizing the road near the abandoned tower. I waddled my way to the farm shop and chatted to Kimberly. She said she sold all sorts of seeds, animals and farm goods here, as well as mentioning her friend who had left a load of tools right up the road. So I sold off some old cloves and snapped up 12 onion seeds as well as 12 pea seeds. I then tried my luck at hunting. So close. I bagged the set of copper tools and found something pretty special. A fabled feather. You'll just see what I mean a little later on. Back in town, I got myself a fishy freebie and a new quest to help rebuild a bridge in a nearby town of Ashmire. Having a peek at the marketplace, certain goods changed in price depending on its demand. Bright Oak also had trade routes with other towns. They were not connected just yet. I walked by a barrel and decided to steal from it, just to see what happened. I lost 5 morale. Whatever that meant. There was a morality and renown scale of some kind. Maybe I'll discover what that means a little later on. But for now it was time to meet the blacksmith, who had lost his hammer. He gave me a bow in order to retrieve it. After some amazing accuracy, I did get it down from the tree. This fine gentleman here had misplaced his jester outfit. I did say I'd bring it back to him, but he said if I found it, I could just keep it. I gave the hammer back to the smith and got told his shop would be opening up tomorrow. Just as I was wandering down from the blacksmith, there was the first part of the jester attire, the tights. Time to meet the stranger at the Hazy Hag, but not before accepting another quest. This one in particular was to kill a hag who had been plaguing the town. However, in order to lure her out, I would need something smelly. The stranger was being mysterious as always, saying he needed to talk to me about creation itself, but only when the right time came, and to look out for a letter from him. So colour me a little confused. I retired back to the farm to do a bit of a clear out, chopping down all the trees and smashing up all the rocks. Well, at least starting it. There's a lot of them. Until a deer wandered onto my land. Luckily for it, I was not very good at shooting. Hunting attempt number 2 was nearly a bust until I hit a lucky shot. Now how about a spot of farming? I carved out 12 places for the onion seeds and 12 places for the pea seeds, and planted them down. Until I got reminded that humans needed to eat in order to live. Well, fair enough, so I chowed down on a red apple, and continued to plant. Now a game like this wouldn't be quite right without having to water a ridiculous amount of plants. So the watering began. After clearing away some more trees, I found a little workbench. Here I got introduced into crafting. I could make all sorts of crafting stations, shelters for animals, storage containers, and even some decor items, just in case I wanted to spruce the place up a little. I soon noticed the build button, which meant I could freely move items such as trees or the workbench a little closer. So I moved all the big decorative trees out the way and continued to chop all of the little ones. Until I got reminded that humans needed to sleep. I wanted to be as efficient as possible, so I continued to use all of my energy, until I got a level up in trade. This gave me 2.5% more chance to get extra wood. So that's fine, I guess. I also spotted the skill cards, none of which I have unlocked just yet. The more I leveled up, the more I will unlock. So we got that to look forward to. In the very early morning, I finally laid down my head and started the day with some liquid life, and continued onwards again with chopping down trees, until getting a little sidetracked by a bunny, scoring me some dinner for later. And why not future-proof a little and get even more meat from hunting? So that's what I did, foraged and hunted, until I helped out this rather dashing red-bonneted man with a thief. He was no match for our wombo combo. I got a potent health elixir and a bandit camp to freely rummage around, getting me some cash, booze and some swanky clothes. And finally some bread, which I nibbled on. I then kept up the bow practice and found Northdale Farm, which was a little odd because I've already been here. But somewhere where I hadn't been were some random spots around town, getting me 2 more of those mysterious fabled feathers, as well as the last 2 pieces of the jester outfit, the garment and the hat. Time to poke my nose around in the old forest. Here was a rather interesting scene, where I found some loaded dice and a note inviting someone to play dice again, but if they were to cheat, they would then be killed. I think we know what happened here. The dice, however, were a very good find, giving me a better chance to find more coins. I then put in a rather bad performance at this bandit camp where this chap absolutely knocked the socks off me. Put it down to still learning the ropes of combat, I guess. I then tried to grab me some berries, but discovered I had no room. I think inventory space was going to become a problem. I had no idea how true this would be. It became a big issue. It certainly hurt my soul. I am a massive hoarder. Looks like I'm going to have to be extremely selective on what I bring along. After a long day exploring and getting my nose bloody, I made it to the tavern, where I sold off some bits and pieces, and seized a recipe for fried trout and rabbit stew. Learnt those suckers up and then headed to the farm shop, where I acquired 12 potato seeds and 12 flax seeds. Once home, it was time to solve my inventory woes, in the form of a small barrel. I crafted up a couple and slapped them down. 1 for materials, and 1 for food and alchemy agents, freeing up some space. For now, after a fairly long day of hunting, I needed a place in order to cook it all, so I crafted up the cooking pot, rustled up some bread, fried trout, and of course, the rabbit. This gave me a level in survival, which meant my hunger would drain a little slower. Then it was time to get the onions and flax sorted, and of course dampen them all down. Finally, doze off. The next day started with the essential watering routine, shortly followed up by finding out how to upgrade my house. This, however, would need a lot of wood and stone, so why not make a start? I kept hacking away until I hit level 2 of trades, giving me an extra ore chance. I was clearly very eager to get this done, so I didn't notice my hunger, and collapsed. I had lost a good chunk of the day, so I snagged up some food and continued onwards, harvesting wood, gorging on snacks, and smashing down stone. Late that night I hit trade level 3, giving me my very first skill cards, 1 for extra wood and 1 for extra stone or ore. I opted for the ore chance, since I was going to continue to smash all the stones around the farm. After a long day of back-breaking labour, I could finally upgrade the house. I had enough for the exterior, as well as inside. I was no longer living in an extremely shabby shack. Some progression was definitely made. The next morning, a very welcomed sight. Rain. No watering duty for me. I could focus on more important things, like smacking stone. And yeah, there was a lot of stone smacking, to the point where I got yet another level in trades, making items cheaper to craft. So why not put this to instant use? And make an anvil. Here I could make new weapons or armor, and even upgrade existing tools. My next objective was to upgrade the pickaxe. I would need 10 iron bars as well as an iron toolkit, wherever you get that from. I stowed up some of the goodies I've collected and made myself a furnace, which did what you probably might expect, smelt ore. For now I had a little bit of copper to put on, but I was really eyeing up the iron. That will have to wait, however. My food situation was getting dire. While looking for some yummy morsels, I came across a little upgrade for my sword. 1 extra damage. Great stuff. In town I got the very information I was looking for. The location of iron. I would need to find Mirthwood Marsh. Thanks, Bramble Quillworthy. I owe you one. On my search I came across a copper bar, as well as a little quest. The town has been haunted by a large shadowy figure at night. There was also one more fabled feather to add to my collection. And a nudge north, some even more goodies, which I then went to go and sell off at my favourite little farm shop. I then scoffed down my final bit of food. Things are very dire. While hunting for a solution, another fabled feather. Unfortunately, a rather oblivious deer. I obtained some more grub in the form of a red apple, and yet another one of those fabled feathers. Seems these little buggers are everywhere. I accidentally chanced across the meadery, the one I got the quest about. Here was a rather angry gentleman, which was a bit of a bother to get rid of. My stamina was low, so I had to play this real slow. After that rather long battle, I saw a letter. From Sibylla to Duncan. Duncan had been spending too much time on his medical remedies, and not enough time on the meadery. There was also a mana key on the table. I investigated further within until another note. This one explains that Duncan was trying to find remedies for his ill daughter. Upstairs, however, was a key to another locked part of the house, as well as a lovely little beekeeper outfit, and some iron. This, believe it or not, was actually an improvement, so on it went. In the last section of the house was a conclusion to this rather sad story. Duncan's farewell to his daughter. He was unsuccessful in finding a remedy that would save her. In pursuing a cure, he had let the rest of his life crumble around him, including the relationship with his wife. So she left. Well, I guess this story hasn't concluded just yet. It was late, so time to head home and collect the little bit of copper I had already smelted. I sizzled up what I had gathered and hunted. I then popped my sleeping bag closer to the door for efficiency's sake, placed my family portrait on the wall, and passed out for the night. The next day was a rather special one. My very first round of vegetables grown were ready. So I plucked up all the onions and peas, hitting level 1 farming. And I also mixed them all together to make some spring soup. 6 of them in total. Perfect timing to satiate my hunger. Looks like I had a letter. It was the stranger, who wanted me to meet him in some ruins. But not so fast. I had some different goals in mind. I was still very much eyeing up that iron pickaxe. Another thing to catch my eye were the flax. They seemed to be ready already. And already hitting level 2 in farming. I had gotten a slightly better grow rate as well as a slightly better crop resistance. But again, I certainly couldn't resist the idea of an iron pickaxe, so on the hunt for iron I went. Only really finding copper. Not quite the one. Feeling disappointed, I made my way to my favourite little farm shop. Here I splurged on some extra seeds. Flax, potato, onion and pea seeds. The hunt for the marsh continued. I foraged a little, shot a few little dearies, and got jumped by a sneaky thief. Well, I guess he wouldn't be much of a thief if he wasn't sneaky. I was clearly dealing with a professional. A professional I really struggled to get a good hit in. He really nailed the roly-poly evasive manoeuvres. He seemed to be getting the better of me. I managed to get a flurry of good hits in, and then the tables were turned. We did this awkward, janky dance. He had struck first, but I struck last. I nabbed a decent amount of coin and a potent health elixir. as well as some rather lovely rugged black trousers. They had 3 times the defense. A good find. But then a bad find. A camp full of bandits, which I certainly couldn't be dealing with right now. I of course still had some time to swipe some cider on the way out. Back to the farm, where I could now set up all of the seeds I had purchased. Pea, potato, onion, and finally the flax. I'm starting to get quite the little operation going. The rest of the night I spent cutting away, and even taunting one of those cheeky bandits that thought he could chase me back to base. I didn't think he'd be getting in here. Well, I had to do loop-de-loop evasive maneuvers until I could sneak back into my house, and was just about to pass out for the night until I discovered a plaque on the wall. Here I could upgrade the floors and walls within my home, as well as get a second story. Some of these cost resources I've never seen before, so this will have to wait for a later me. Early the next morning I finally got enough copper to make the next upgrade for my sword, giving me 1 extra hull damage. Very nice. Just in time to use it on that cheeky bandit that chased me around the farm all night. For some reason overnight he had turned into some form of pacifist, and just stood there and took it. I thought this might have been some complex reverse psychology. But, well, anyway, a few bonks and he keeled over. A weird interaction that left me a little puzzled. Another puzzle to be getting on with was to find the iron toolkit. I guessed it was probably at the blacksmith, so I sold off some bits and pieces and headed on over. It was, however, rather expensive, so guess that will have to wait for now. Instead I opted to buy a diagram for some new swanky armour. Instantly memorised that bad boy, and then I finally found it. The marshes. Here was the much sought after iron, and also another one of those thieves. I tried to be slick with the old shoot the explodey barrel trick, but failed rather epically. I had mostly learnt their annoyingly evasive moveset by now, so this fight was a little easier, only taking a few scrapes. He had one of those extremely valuable elixirs on him, and I could freely pilfer his camp. But most importantly, I had struck iron. So I bobbed and weaved through the marshes in search for iron chunks, and then got approached by a rather froggy fella. It certainly was a bit tougher than your regular old bandit, getting me low after a couple of swipes, so I had to glug down some liquid health. The attacks seemed to come out of nowhere, with no real telegraph or wind-up. You'd have to have extremely quick reflexes for these, and it seemed like, at this point, I did not. After getting through most of my health elixirs, I did eventually get it down. But at what cost? At the cost of some iron, so definitely worth it in my opinion. While I squelched around the marshes, I stumbled upon a campsite. This acted like a home away from homes, and I could also use the little signpost to fast travel between locations. Very handy. Iron was a plenty here, but there also seemed to be a lot of these froggy fellas, who were a massive pain in my neck. I went for the classic shoot the explodey barrel, and this time, it worked. And then our battle spilled out into the perimeter of the abandoned shack. A few more swipes and it was over. Inside the abandoned shack was a steel bar, some leather, other bits and pieces, a extremely sad letter, but most importantly, another fabled feather. I was low on health and hunger, so I stopped for a moment to fill up on some food. And then a sight for sore eyes, a friendly face within the marsh. Rowan, who was a painter. He offered me the painting he was working on. Rather generous, I'm not too sure how long the painting took him, but generous nonetheless. Thanks Rowan, you're a real one. Venturing a little further, I found a abandoned church, netting me another level in survival, and a little bit extra health. Since nothing bad happens in spooky-looking abandoned churches, I decided to take a look. It certainly was a little spooky, but nothing bad happened. I even found myself a lovely little preacher's vestment. And a stone throw away, the hat to go alongside it. Fairly battered and bruised, I clawed my way out of the marshes, back into Bright Oak, and found a fabled feather, as well as Meriel, who wanted me to make an elixir. After returning home, I got that furnace up and running, to chew through all of that iron. Storage once again was becoming a pain in my backside, so I created another barrel, to somewhat relieve it. I then, of course, added the marsh painting to the wall of pictures. It's coming along nicely. Another thing that's coming along nicely is the farm. My peas and potatoes were ready. After unearthing a good few of them, I hit level 3 within farming, unlocking a couple of skill cards, one to give a slight chance to improve the yield, and another to make them potentially grow a bit quicker. Unfortunately, no rain today, so I had to do all the watering myself. I made sure to restock the furnace before heading out to the marshes once again. And once again, it was mainly to get me some iron. But I did snag a sneaky steel bar in this chest here, and then continued on the hunt, until I noticed a note from Bramble Quillworthy, speaking about his adventures within the marshes, and how dangerous it could be. I had already worked out that one. He also laid out a warning to be extremely careful if you head further south into the bleak woods. So with that tidbit in mind, I kept on smashing away, finding Widow's Glade. I didn't explore the area just yet, that will have to be for another time, but for now I headed back to the marshes in order to get some more iron. The marshes were pretty bare of iron, seems like I already got pretty much all of it. But I did make some friends, and then poked my nose around a little east from town. Here I found Fernfoot, a very interesting fellow, but for now my attention turned towards the white unicorn. A very pricey purchase, but I wanted it, so I was going to get it, by any means necessary. A small step towards that was selling off a few bits and pieces. Fernfoot was the main man if you wanted to haul off your fabled feathers. In exchange, he offered a few services. He could expand your inventory and give you more skill card slots. Extremely useful stuff. I put down 8 fabled feathers and picked up an extra skill card slot. I then popped in Lumberjack to get a little bit extra wood now and then. And then it was time to head home, but via a route I have never been down before, chancing upon another fabled feather, as well as something a little bit more menacing, a Spriggan, who hit like a truck. So I sidestepped the Spriggan and then extracted all of the goodies it was guarding. It really wasn't too pleased about this, and followed me into town. The good people of Bright Oak were having none of it. As I executed tactical evasive maneuvers around this fence, the people of the town just poked away. Well, that worked out rather well. After all those exciting antics in town, I finally got home and got back to basics, smelting some things up, organising the storage barrels, and chopping down a bunch of trees. With the wood, I could change the decor of the floor, which was definitely worth it and didn't look almost exactly the same. A little disappointed, I laid my head down. It is always a great start to the day when it's raining. Not quite as great as this little number, the armour I bought the diagram for a very long time ago, and completely forgot about. It boasted 20 armour points. That's a lot. So I added that into the back of my mind on my to-do list. The grind continued, smacking stone and whacking wood. This got me level 5 in trades, which meant I had a little bit of an extra gem chance. And something I had a lot of was plants to pick, peas and potatoes. I then rustled up some spring soup, which, believe it or not, was really easy and efficient to grow during the spring. Hard to believe, I know. Moving on, it was time to progress towards the new armour set, which involved creating a loom. Putting the flax that I've grown into this bad boy would get me the linen I needed for the new armour. I was inching closer, 5 linen and 3 steel left to go. Some issues were arising though. Charcoal. It was needed to make steel bars, and in order to make charcoal, I needed a kiln. And in order to make a kiln, I needed stone, which I searched high and low for, but just couldn't find enough of it. So I went out on a stone search, which was rather unsuccessful. I did get a little bit of food and other bits and pieces, but not what I was searching for. A little bit of good news was I had enough iron to get the iron pick upgrade, just leaving the toolkit remaining. Then it was time for a slumber session. In the very early morning of day number 9, I had my very first bundle of linen. And then I had some harvesting to do. So much so I got another level, which increased my orchard grow rate. Now for a little spoiler alert. I never actually bought a fruit tree during this whole playthrough, so this was irrelevant. But something extremely relevant for right now was onions. These suckers went straight into my spring soup. I also fried up some meat, which was from my failed stone hunt. Today I had a plan, and that was to sell off enough of my goodies in order to purchase an iron toolkit. But I did invest in a little bit of seeds too, getting some flax and some more onions. I then sold off some venison, which fetched a really nice price, as well as a boatload of those spring soups. I then had a little peruse of the marketplace, and saw all the things I would purchase the day I became extremely wealthy. Because, trust me, that day will come. But for today, a couple of extra quests. I scoffed down some spring soup and had a look over them. The first one was to deal with some pesky bandits, who had set up some blockades around a village nearby. Next up was the search for a missing man, Carter. Now for the real reason I came to town, the precious iron toolkit. This would essentially wipe me out of cash, but was a move in the right direction, so I snapped it up. I plodded back to the farm and started planting the flax and the onions. And of course making sure the furnace and the loom were still up and running. And then the precious iron upgrade. I was very pleased. I could now bash down big boy boulders. And then I was less pleased. I just finished watering all the plants when it started to rain. Typical. But this did mean I could now get enough stone in order to craft up a kiln. My attention, however, did turn to iron once again, because you needed iron in order to make steel. So I was on my way, just strolling through town and, random froggy fella. Me and this brave lass worked together to try and take out this very out-of-place creature. It was really doing a number on me. Fortune had it, essentially the whole town came to help out, and I got a little bit comfortable and tried to pick up some fish. There is a time and place for everything, and gathering fish right then and there wasn't it. So battered and humiliated, I needed to call my iron search a little short, and head home for the night to recuperate. I did manage to gather a little bit of iron, which I then smelted up, popped on a little bit more of linen, and hung my hat up for the night. Day 10 started up with the kiln, and then I fired up some charcoal. Today I had a plan. Plan of big money. But how could one get big money? And then it hit me. Big tree. Potentially the decorative trees around the farm could be valuable, right? Yeah, big right. Alright, enough of the big. Gathering up all of the trees and then selling them off did give me a very healthy sum of cash. Just shy of 1,600 coins. Not too shabby. And I had a plan for this money. It was for a chicken. A rather expensive investment, costing me about 1,000 coins. But the eggs that it produced would be a return on my investment. Eventually. Until then, it was time to craft it a home. A little chicken stall. All I needed to do was gather up some hay and then, hey presto. Pun intended. My new little chick definitely wasn't that impressed, however. I guess I'm gonna have to do better in order to make her happy. The next little while was spent gathering up some hay to replace the ones I used up, and then continued to tend to my crafting stations. My hard work had paid off. I got all the steel and linen I needed for my armor upgrade. And yeah, this was a big one. Currently at a measly 3 armor, jumping all the way up to 20. A good way to round out the day, and a good way to start the next one. It was still raining, as well as my very first egg. A momentous moment. This is the beginning of my egg empire. Alright, well, I might be overselling this a little. Moving on. The start of my adventure today began with fighting this lovely chap, who was extremely efficient at blocking. Much to my annoyance. I mean, just look at this, it's ridiculous! I did eventually wise up, and just threw out a heavy attack. Should have done that ages ago. Next to the camp was a note, talking about someone who had been exploring the area, investigating all these strange stones. So I gave it a slap, resulting in a very satisfying noise. I then hit a very satisfying explodey barrel on Bandit, chugged my very last potion and finished him off. Inside the camp I got a health potion back, as well as some other bits and pieces. But there was one bandit left to deal with, who got a few good hits on me, so I had to chug my very last potion. Again. And finished him off. Again. And fortunately found another health potion. Again. But certainly something I had never done before was discover these strange stones. On closer inspection, one of the runes had lit up, from the stone that I had hit. A little walk south was the second one. I continued the search for the last one, until I wandered into a wanderer. This chap was definitely a bit better geared than your usual bandito. During mid-escape I had another moral dilemma. This guy had a very bad day. I could choose to do the honourable thing and bury him with his sword, or simply just take it from him. Since I was somewhat dealing with a time-sensitive scenario, I didn't think burying him was a very good idea, given the man clad in armour right at my heels. So I just snagged the sword, and moonwalked my butt out of there. After longer than I would actually like to mention, I eventually did find the stone, which gave me a new skill card. Naked and Afraid, making me deal 25% extra damage with no clothes on. Don't think I'll be using that one. Back at the farm I had some work to do. A few workstations to resupply, but mainly I had a lot of plants to pick, and I mean literally every single one of them. I laboured through the night to get them all harvested, unlocking level 6 of farming. This meant I had a couple more skill cards at my disposal. One that boosted bonding with animals, and another one for an extra chance at animal goods. And then to round out the day, I had to meticulously water down every single one of my crops, until I got to the last 2. What a great way to end the day. Well, I couldn't sulk forever. I had some soup to make. 13 spring ones, to be exact. And a couple of bunnies to cook up. Chowed down on one of them and then checked up on Chick Chick, who was feeling rather smug today. At least that's what that face looks like to me. Smug or not, I still got my precious egg. I then went to visit my favourite little farm shop, to sell off a sword and some other old pieces of clothing, and to buy up some onion seeds, 12 of them. While heading out of town I got jumped by a thief. I thought for a change I might try out the bow, and see how well it went. Long story short, not very well. So I slowly dragged the thief back into town, where the whole town came together to absolutely run him into the ground. It was quite the sight to see. This gave me a level in melee. For reasons beyond me, I'd never actually struck the thief. My guess was because the townfolk finished them off, it counted towards my melee. Well, anyway, I'm just gonna have to let that mystery lie. But I did head to the blacksmith to procure a few diagrams. One for the iron sword, one for the steel sword, and one for a new helmet. On the way home, I did check in on Chick Chick, who was severely slacking in her egg laying. I wasn't angry, just disappointed. I carved out a few more spots to lay the new batch of onions I bought, and sunk them in. It was time to peruse over the new diagrams I got. I quickly deduced that the iron sword was probably a massive waste of time, and it was probably better to just jump straight into steel. So time for steel production. And for that I would need a lot of wood. So that's what I did for the night, got my chop on. I also got a new level in trades and a couple of skill cards. One in particular looked pretty juicy. Extra money for selling goods. I managed to gather up a good stockpile of wood, resupplied all of the craft stations, and hit the hay. The next morning was very much the same old routine, resupplying crafting stations and harvesting crops. But if I wanted a new sword or new helmet, there's one thing I did need, and that was iron. So do you know what that means? That's right, off to the marshes again, where I really didn't find much iron at all, just a little ratty. I continued west until I came across an ancient battleground. Here was a note that seems to be written by some kind of ghost or spirit. It was all a bit ominous, to be honest with you, but I did find a few iron pieces. And then something new. Something I couldn't gather. This was silver. I would need a steel pickaxe in order to harvest it. And another new thing, a wolf. This one was no joke. It attacked with a long string of combos, leaving me a little unsure on what was going to come next. The only real good tactic I could work out was beating it to the punch, cancelling out its attack. But even then it was still rather close. This left me with no healing supplies. It's safe to say I'm just going to avoid them, for now. I managed to get a little bit more iron, one of those runestones, and a big nope, not today, just below it. Until I was rather hungry, so I chowed down on some cheese and bread. My hunger for iron, however, was all-consuming. I found myself in extremely dangerous places with very little health, in search of the stuff. A couple of ratties here, a load of froggy fellas there. I was really risking it all. But if I could get my hands on the oh-so-very valuable iron, it would be worth it. Surrounded by froggy fellas, I did the good old loop-de-loop and came back to the iron. It was mine for the taking. I ventured deeper into danger, but managed to find a camp. And this definitely was sight for sore eyes. There was a little bit more iron, but most importantly, a fast travel location. Back in the safety of home, I got smelting. I also got a little curious, breaking through a hidden piece of my land I had never noticed before. Discovering some new resources, ones I couldn't quite get my grubby little mitts on, just yet. So I had to stick to what I could grab, stone and crops. The only problem was, I was running out of places to stow them. This issue had an easy resolution though. Large chests. However, it would cost me some of that precious iron. But some sacrifices would have to be made in order to satisfy my hoarder tendencies. Oh boy, that felt good. But just beyond the perimeter of my little homestead was something that really didn't feel so good. A Spriggan slap. A good way to lift one's spirits again was with another skill card slot. I also just so happened to have a couple more that I unlocked. One that lowered my hunger rate and the other increased my health. But there really was only one that I wanted to place in for now. Artisan, in order to get more money. The obvious choice. Day 15 and I was shooting towards getting me a new sword. This involved the tedium of gathering raw resources and making sure the crafting stations were topped up at all times. The steel wasn't going to smelt itself, after all. I then threw together a scarecrow. 2 scarecrows. I obviously mean just one scarecrow, not 2 scarecrows. It was 1 scarecrow to scare 2. Well, you get what I mean. I then harvested some potatoes and made my way to my favourite sell spot. This was a fairly exciting visit, because not only was I going to get the usual onion seeds, but also diversify a tad, with some wheat and oat seeds. This meant more plots for my new scarecrow friend here to watch over. I think I may have bitten off a bit more than I can chew, however. I spent all night picking crops up and watering them down, gaining another level in farming for a better bond rate with my animals. Another thing I had gained over the days was a boatload of potatoes, enough to completely empty the shop of coins, and to almost single-handedly purchase a rooster. That's right, the egg empire was a go. Chick couldn't contain her joy. To pass the time, I went out for a speedy little iron run, but I came across a foot. Not something you see every day, but I'll definitely be saving that for later. This was actually the smelly thing I needed to hunt the hag. I wasn't going to go down that road just yet. I had a load of iron to not find. But I did find a fabled feather, and this lovely gentleman who had lost his chickens. He wanted me to smack them with a stick to send them back home. There was 5 of them in total. I got to the first one and gave it a bop. 5 bops, actually, and it completed the quest. Alright, I'll take it, I guess. This game sure does have some interesting quirks. I got a great little chicken hat, which I sold off for some extra coin. I got back for some much needed rest. The next day I had the final piece of steel needed for the sword, adding 11 extra damage. Now to go for a test run, stocking up on the usual seeds on the way. This new piece of equipment put down thieves with a quickness. Suddenly the marshes weren't such a scary place to scavenge. With my newfound confidence, I arrived at Ashmire to help fix their bridge. But I needed wood. I should have guessed that. So I set off back home via a little detour, where I got a new charm and a fabled feather. I ran into a fair few froggy fellas, but they weren't so fearsome anymore. Once home, I grabbed the wood and fell asleep just before passing out. I awoke to the usual work: crops, stations, and another row of onions. I used the sign to jump back to the marshes, and mined as I went along. I made it back to the bridge at Ashmire and built it up. Then I went on a bit of a stabbing spree, taking care of a bunch of local nasties, tapping myself of energy, so I went to my nearby camp and had a snooze. Back at home base, and the crops needed some attention. And speaking of attention, it looks like Chick had been getting a lot from our new friend here, because I had a new cog spinning in the Egg Empire machine. Nugget. And then I wanted to tick off a mission from my very long quest log, so I gathered all the ingredients needed for the brew quest and handed them in. I got myself a potion recipe in return. I made an appearance at the blacksmith and got some precious iron, as well as the iron toolkit for an axe upgrade. I was planning ahead, and since this season was winding to a close, I grabbed a bunch of seeds for the upcoming summer. It was a good idea to get a healthy stockpile of them every single time the shop's inventory refreshed. I went for barley, cabbage, and corn seeds. The barley I could farm up right now, so that's what I did when I got home. This got me level 8 in farming for a faster crop growth rate. I then scooped up potatoes and peas, gave them a little drizzle, but most importantly, got the upgrade to my axe. Hardwood was now fair game. Then I called it a night. Well, I guess called it a day because I awoke at night. Anyway, it was time to get the new axe really swinging, clearing my land of all the trees and hardwood. Apart from these big old trunks, I'll need the next upgrade for that. I went to check out a little west from home, somewhere I had never visited before. I got a dashing new painting, a fabled feather, and a silly deer. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Okay, just gonna line up that shot right. Maybe I can higher. Well, nailed it. A little further up was Agatha's hut. Here I could buy a vast array of decorative items, but that would be for another day. It looked like Nugget had all grown up, doubling my egg output. The snowball had begun rolling. Little did I know these grape seeds were the start of something that will blow the egg empire out of the water. But you'll have to wait for summer for that one. For now, I was on the hunt for clues. Something had been bothering the good people of Bright Oak, and I was here to put an end to it. Just not today. I found the first clue, but searching high and low, I couldn't find the second one. So I slumped home, did my usual farm maintenance routine, and tried the next night, finding some claw marks, and the perpetrator, Marcus, who had turned into a werewolf. He was nice enough to have a chat for a bit, but it was time to put his terror to an end. I started strong with Explodey Barrel, but this was the hardest fight I've had so far. I had to guzzle down every last drop of my healing potions, and it really came down to the wire. But I was victorious. I got his tooth as a prize, giving extra damage against all types of wolves. As I was skipping home singing tales of my brilliance, Let's pretend that didn't happen. I attempted to cheer myself up by expanding my food inventory slots, getting an extra row. Homeward, and all of my crops were ready, and I resigned myself for chopping trees for the rest of the night. Perhaps the simple life suited me better. Day 23, I did have a spring in my step, however. I had accumulated enough iron to make the helm, at long last. A nice new shiny layer of paint. In Bright Oak, I perused the shops, sold some odds and ends, and noticed the market sold health elixirs. A game changer. Safe to say I'll be visiting here regularly. I plucked a little berry on my way out, getting me a reduced stamina drain rate. The rest of the day was spent mining and bullying bandits. This gave me a level in melee, normal, as well as a level in farming, not normal. I shan't question it. I got some more melee damage, and the very last card in farming. Venturing deeper, I got a painting of a Lou, and was chased by a wraith. Sprinting past a shadowed shrine, didn't really have a chance to have a good look. The fear of the unknown had gotten the better of me, so I picked a scrap with some beasties I knew I could handle, nabbing a feather. Exploring some unknown areas bore a good amount of fruit, which I got to smelting. And since that run was so successful, why not continue into the unfamiliar foothills? Here was another shrine that I couldn't do anything with, just yet. But I did get a truffle, a fine fungus. I had a few skirmishes throughout the night, including a wanderer and a bandit. Used their camp for a little nap and kept up the search for hardwood. I also got teased by some unobtainable silver. Grabbed another feather and reached a mine, where there was a healthy amount of resources to hoover up. Inside, much the same. Stones aplenty, another feather, and a new friendly face, who slapped me silly, which drained all of my elixirs. This place was absolutely crawling with these guys, which had me a little worried. Nothing a few well-placed shots couldn't help with though. They dropped some silver ore. But there was more of them. A lot more. A tactical retreat was needed. I then read a warning that something far worse lived further within. Today definitely wasn't the day for this, so I smashed up what I could and headed off. That was a very good haul. This opened up the option for my next upgrade, the steel pickaxe, and with all the stone I could ramp up production with another furnace. The second round of planned potato was a go. I bought some more grape and strawberry seeds and sold off all my excess produce, netting me a good collection of coins, which I bought the steel toolkit with. A short visit home to check up on the chickens and drop off my seeds, and then I was off to deal with a bandit, the one by the abandoned tower. This chap was definitely a bit tougher than your regular old bandit, but was just as stupid. He was nice enough to leave me a new diagram, a chair and a feather. Once home, I swung by the little stall and saw all the chickens huddled in, restocked the furnaces, and added the chair to the wall of pictures. Great stuff. The first day of summer was here, and it was an exciting one. I had a lot of work to do. I laid out all of the plots for the new seasonal crops: grapes, strawberries, carrots, and cabbages. Then the extremely fun task of watering them all. I then noticed a new member to the Egg Empire, who currently didn't have a place to sleep. So I set my sights on this massive chicken coop, a big undertaking, and currently not within my budget. So another stall it was. Don't just stand there. Fine. Happy now? With the massive abundance of iron I had, I could start the Fermented Federation, putting together a keg and a cask. Here I could make booze and age them. I did a little test run on some mead I had lying around to see what the price increase would be. The rest of the day I spent gathering wood and getting another level in trades. This one got me a higher ore chance. The next morning the aged mead was ready, adding around 20 coins to the value. It was worth maturing these. I, however, was missing a step in the production line: fermentation. So I looked at the press, which clearly stated a manual press to produce fermented fruits. Had to be the one. Except it wasn't. No fermented fruits in sight. This betrayal ran deep. So let's try that again, with the preserves barrel. And yeah, this was the actual one I needed. I started the chain of production. The Fermented Federation was in full swing. I used some honey for the first batch of mead. I instantly realised the gold mine I was sitting on here. There was some serious profits to be made. So I rushed off to my favoured farm shop. I sold off another shipment of potatoes and doubled down on more grapes and strawberry seeds. At home it was the end of the spring chapter, but a beginning to a much more profitable one. And, oh boy, do I mean more profitable. It gets kind of bonkers. But for now it was time to plant the seeds I had got, as well as carve out some areas for the future. I then had a little discovery: paths. So I sectioned off a work area and bunkered down. Day 28 was the day of rearranging, getting the layout just right. Perfect. The evening was for yet another iron hunt. I fought a few froggy fellas, bopped a bunch of iron, as well as a rat, which got me 2 new skill cards: higher critical rate and melee damage. I then got the furnaces all spun up and winded down for the day. Early morning I got my hands dirty with some carrots, kept the mead flowing and the furnace burning. Finally upgraded to the steel pickaxe. I flew over my first 2 aged meads to the store, and then tripled down on grapes and strawberries. Not even sure if triple down's a thing, but you get the idea. I then sized up a Spriggan, which was quite the battle. It got nail-bitingly close. I had a little detour to grab some much-needed health pots, and saw my crop plots had been sabotaged. I guess someone had not been doing his job. Maybe I did need 2 scarecrows. Anyway, down went the strawberries, and then the unthinkable happened. Yeah, this one stung. It just doesn't feel right if the crops aren't in a perfect little row. I'm definitely going to lose sleep over this. Fortunately, sowing the grapes went issue-free. And then I nabbed some cabs. That went straight into a vegetable soup. This is a decent meal that gives health as well as hunger. So this is what I gorged on for the next while. On my way out for an explore, I noticed a new addition to the chicken family. I hunted a deer right outside the hunter's hut, funnily enough, and found Richard scrapping with a boar. He certainly knew what he was doing. Best to stay on his good side. A nudge east and I got to a large bandit encampment, absolutely teeming with them. I gathered up a couple to get a hit with the old explodey barrel and nothing. They had lost interest. Attempt 2 was much more successful. A few bits and pieces here, but the main prize was another fabled feather. Holmes and I had some straws to snap up, which went straight into making jam. And I went straight to bed. The next day I had some grapes to grab, but nowhere to put them, so I put together another barrel and popped them in. With not much else to do, I poked around for some new locations, not really resulting in much apart from a feather. The jam was ready, and what a satisfactory snack, giving some energy as well as hunger. Out of the way, vegetable stew, there's a new king in town. This sugary sustenance kept me up and running for much longer, so let's keep them coming. The evening was spent getting wood, and adding a little detail to my crops. Lovely. The fermented grapes were done, so on went some wine. One of many to come. The morning after I kept up with the winery, and had a decision to make. Brandy or aged wine. I went with the wine. Time will tell if this was the correct one. I journeyed back to the foothills in search of some resources, but I mainly found baddies to squash. I did happen upon a new fast travel location at a camp, and called it quits. I then accidentally made some grape jam. This will unfortunately eat into my profits, but more strawberries and grapes were ready, 38 of each, so in the grand scheme of things, 2 won't be a massive issue. My aged wine was done, and it was the right choice in the end, giving me about 15 more coins compared to the brandy. I made and lined up a keg, as well as 2 preserve barrels the next day. I had more grapes than I knew what to do with, so another cask as well, for good measure. My iron was running a little dry, so I made a quick stop to the marshes on the way to an inventory upgrade, expanding the materials tab. There was yet another chicken calling this place home. I then kept up with the wine, juggled all of the stations, and got the iron on. The next morning I rose to even more grapes. This is getting kind of silly. But do you know what else is also silly? Me ignoring the main quest for the last 28 days. I've got a challenge to complete after all. Best get to it. I met the stranger at the ruins, who told me about an ancient civilization I was somehow an ancestor of. He also said this land has been cursed by an evil elf, and it was down to me to save the day because I was special. I knew it. So I needed a relic from within the ruins. Off I went, taking out some ratties, a fair few actually, and found some gold, which was out of my reach for now. Further on were some cave walkers, a fair few of them actually. After they got dealt with, I got a rusty great helm. Slightly misleading name because it sucked. Some more crystal chaps and the relic was mine. I returned to the stranger and got told I needed to search for even more relics. After my dungeon dive, I did some restocking, picking and watering. Even that one very out of place strawberry. I hate it so much. Today was Operation Search for Silver. So I went to check the resource guide, only to find no mention of silver. Thanks for nothing, Bramble Quillworthy. So I guess I was on my own. I stopped by the shop to sell the not-so-great helm and headed towards the one place I saw silver before, Bleakwood. Here I got chased by the Wraith again, and decided to stand my ground. And to be honest with you, it wasn't actually that bad at all. So back to the silver search, stumbling on a cursed oak. Not entirely sure how it got that name. But I did find a ring diagram, a painting, and a feather. I eventually made it into the depths of Bleakwood, in the dead of night. Speaking of which, it's ridiculously dark in here. I can't see a thing. Hold on 1 second. Much better. With my new vision, I found something. The final words of Bramble Quillworthy. Well, now I feel a little guilty criticising him earlier. I also guess this makes sense why he never reported where you could get silver from. He never made it that far. Thanks for the pen, bud. Rest easy. A wolf later, and I struck silver, as well as a sneaky ladder that led to a fabled feather. This place was really littered with silver, but it did have a guard dog, one I couldn't be dealing with right now. So I was off, right into the path of another relic and a dead end. So I had to bust out some jukes. Smooth. My greed for gear has always been a problem. This wasn't the first time it had gotten me into trouble. I did manage to grab the shinies in the chest before scurrying off. Gave these rats a good old stabby stab, getting me some crit chance. I got the last of the silver I could and got out of there, smelting them down at home. I plucked some grapes and strawberries, then sunk down for some well-earned rest. I added the raven painting to the wall of pictures and pondered what to do with the day. I of course did the usual, tend to the chickens, keep the wine machine spinning and ore smelting, but I resigned myself to just chopping wood. It was always handy after all. After a boring day, why not have a bit of fun in the foothills, in search of something exciting? I had a nice start, with a feather, followed up with some hardwood gathering. High up into the hills, there was a wolfie guarding some goodies that I wanted, so the fight was on. By this point I had really mastered the way of whacking wolves. It's all about the art of dodging. I made sure to evade the first attack, and then just give them a little poke in the back. Rinse and repeat. The goodies weren't really worth it, but at least there was another feather and some silver. Near the edge of the hills I spotted a boulder blocking a path, so I had a look. Here was a bear, an extremely fearsome foe. This would surely be my toughest challenge yet. That's a little odd. Let's try that again. As I was saying, this massive beast strikes terror into any poor soul that... This grisly titan tears through enemies like Ah, come on. No man alive can match this monster in... You know what? I'll give up. So all the silver was mine. As unfair as it may have seemed, I really did try. I also got a diagram for Winter's Bite. So after that rather anticlimactic battle, I headed home, grabbing a feather along the way. Here I pondered over the diagram, and yeah, it was worth it. 30 damage. That's insane. Safe to say this jumped right onto the top of my to-do list. I dreamt sweet dreams of Winter's Bite that night, and then got straight to it. Buying up iron, smelting steel, and went to track down the last few chunks of silver I needed. I knew exactly where to go. Iron Delve Mine. Here I got some iron, and ran headfirst into some unexplored areas. I kept an eye out for the monster, the one the notes had mentioned. But the monster never came, just silver and some new gems. Amethysts, rubies, and diamonds. But best of all, a cheese painting. Back at base I got work smelting down the last silver I needed. All I had to do was wait. So I killed some time with farming, and eliminated that very out of place strawberry seed. I could sleep easy once again. Still some more time left, so I passed it with winemaking. Then it was ready. She was a beauty. 12 more damage. I celebrated the best way I knew how, and added the cheese painting to the wall of pictures. I had some eggs to grab and some food to cook, which got me 5 food efficiency. But more importantly, I had some money to make. Taking 16 aged wines, I headed to the shops. My old stabber was worth a good chunk of change, and I drained the shop of the rest of its coins. So I had to head to the next shop front, reaching just over 4,000 coins. I had a plan for all of this money. A few seats, but the main attraction was the coop. I ran home to give my chickens a new home, but I was a little shy on wood. Well, around 150. Before tackling that, I drove in the seeds I got, carrots and cabbages. Then it was down to business. This got me the last level in trade, and a card that reduced the amount of materials I needed for crafting. I deforested every last tree on my land, getting enough for the coop. I cleared at a spot and placed it down. Very nice. I know all of my chicks will love this upgrade. I expanded the winery a smidge with another keg. Went to see all the chickens sheltering from the rain and gave them some grub. They were over the moon. I think. Not sure. The menu's somewhat contradictory. Anyway, I had wine to make and a bunch of feathers to hand in, unlocking a skill card slot and placing in cultivator for an extra crop chance. Then I was surveying new locations and happened upon the lakeside camp. Then a man in need. Godfrey, an owner of this winery. A competitor. Someone had been sabotaging his wine. And no, I promise it wasn't me. There was also a wolf den to deal with. In order to get to the bottom of this mystery, I first spoke to his wife, who was extremely unhelpful. So next up, his son, who was a rather mopey fella, seemed to hate the fact his dad didn't give him much attention, and paid it all to the winery. Prime suspect right here. I saw a barrel that had been tampered with and spoke with the guard. He said the son often visited the cellar. At the end of the world's worst hedge maze, I found a letter, saying that after a bit of experimentation they found a way to sabotage the wine, and if the wine was sabotaged, maybe they would get more attention. I think I know the culprit here. Grabbing the feather, I got to the guard's house. There was a letter, saying that he really liked his job here. He clearly wanted to keep this job, and tampering with the wine was a sure way to lose it, so I don't think it was him. Well, after my investigation, it was clearly the son. A job well done. But there was one more job to do. The wolves den. With my swanky new sword, this was completed in no time flat. Just a few wolves to show who's boss. Just like how I was bossing this winery production when I got back. Alright, fine. That was a poor transition idea. The next day I was tracking down the relic in the foothills, as I happened upon a jewel. My money is on it being a draw. As I was trying to locate the relic, I spotted Rowan, up in the hills. So I clambered up to say hello, getting myself another lovely painting. Thanks, Rowan. Top guy. Nearby was a big old hole in the cliff. Inside was a good amount of gems, a steel bar, and the relic. This sword is a massive game changer. It cuts through bandits like no man's business. Talking business, I kept up with the Fermented Federation. It is rather difficult to keep up with though. The grapes have a very fast growth rate, needing to be harvested every day or two. It's a tad ridiculous. Just as ridiculous as the wall of pictures was becoming. I wonder how far it'll get. Day 41 consisted of me going to the shops to get some ore, grab some potions, and head to the marshes for the last relic. And I got another one of those satisfying gong sounds. Gets me every time. As it reached evening, I restocked all the aging barrels and headed to Fernfoot, unlocking my final skill card slot for a chance of a faster growth rate. The stranger was next, so we met up at Ashmire. He combined all the relics together, and we had a little stroll together, coming to one of those shrines. Jammed in the device and out popped a hooded statue. These were gateways into other worlds, but each shrine needed a bunch of items to open. This one here needed some herbs. I rolled back into Ashmire and grabbed a contract to deal with a froggy fella. And why not knock this one out straight away? Got to the location, swigged a stamina pot, and went for the barrel. I swear these bows never hit the target. Let's get an instant replay. Make of that what you will. A few more stabs and it was done. In town I got talking to Wolf, who had lost a bet and was broke. He wanted me to give him a ruby to pay off all of his debts. I'll get back to you on that. Returning home, I got to picking grapes. Like I said, it's every day with these things. I rounded up some wood to enhance the wine production, just a smidge. I got a cask and 2 more kegs. This meant I had to do some rearranging. Lovely. The carrots and cabbages were ready to go straight into some stew. And I was ready for bed, but I had some mail from someone called Alara. She wanted to meet me at her house within the foothills. Why not? A rare sight the next day. Rain in the summer. No time to dwell on that though. I had a severed foot to transport to the marshes. It was time to deal with the hag. I must say, she had some mean old headbutts on her. We traded a few blows, but she went down, getting me a new portrait and a new charm to put on, giving a 5% bonus to defense. Click here for part 2, if it's out.